Hello, sweet friend, and welcome back to another episode of Edit with Me. I am Kelly, your editor today, and we are going to be doing something a little bit different today. We are going to be jumping into the shoes of a beginner and explaining Lightroom, explaining what all of the different tools do in a really fun edit. So if that sounds like it's interesting for you, I encourage you to stick around. You do not have to go at this alone. I am here to help and hopefully point out some tips and tricks that you haven't learned yet. So grab a coffee, kick off your shoes, and come along with me. We're going to be taking this beautiful in-home image from this to this today. Alrighty, let's roll that intro. If you are watching this, I am going to just go ahead and assume that you are a beginner in photography. I want to be one of the ones to encourage you and say it only gets better from here. I know that you may be feeling lost or overwhelmed or frustrated or confused or even regret, like maybe you don't know what you're doing. Believe me, we have all been there. So I want to just kind of give you some tips and tricks today, give you a little bit of encouragement today, and hopefully you find this helpful to unraveling the secrets of Lightroom, or even what all the tools mean, or even how to properly process an image. Maybe you're just not sure, or you're just starting out, or you're not confident in what you're doing yet. I want to start with a quote. I often do that in my show, and I'm such a lover of words. I know that a lot of other people are, but words touch me in a way that not many things can. And this quote is from Jodi Picoult, and she's an author. It's fairly well used, but I really do think that it kind of dives to the heart of why we as artists and photographers and creators do what we do. The quote is, "This is what I like about photographs. They're proof that once, even if just for a heartbeat, everything was perfect." Isn't that what we want as photographers? We want to create a perfect, visceral, living and breathing image for our clients or for ourselves. If you're a landscape photographer or a product photographer, whatever the case may be, we are always trying to show that just for once, even if just for a tiny heartbeat, everything was perfect. Well, that's very difficult to do. There are 1,025,000 definitions of perfection. So many. If you look at the world and how many photographers there are, each of those photographers is on a path to have their own perfection, to create something perfect in this world. And that's how many viewpoints you have, how many techniques you have, how many subjects you have. So starting that journey in your photography career with the comparison game is very deadly. And I want to get you out of that. So we are going to give you some tools to build up your confidence. First of all, I want to welcome you to Lightroom. Don't judge my catalog. It's quite messy. Let me get some of this stuff out of the way. This is Lightroom CC. There are two versions of Lightroom, both put out by Adobe. There is Lightroom Classic, and there is Lightroom CC, which is the Creative Cloud version. I willfully choose CC because it uploads, and when I sync, I can get all of my images and my edits to my phone or to the Adobe Cloud, so I can work on them wherever I am. Basically, that is the reason I choose CC over Classic. Now, if you edit in Classic, your tools may look different than mine, and that's okay. But for the most part, they're going to be relatively in the same place. The differences being if you have presets, they're going to be off to the left, whereas on mine, when we're editing, they're going to be off to the right. So this is Lightroom. It is where most professional photographers do the majority of their tweaks and edits. Now, you will have some that do Photoshop only. You will have some that edit in ACR or Camera Raw or Bridge, as it used to be known. And those are all Adobe tools, so they kind of talk to each other, but there are just some people who usually what they learn on is what they stay on. I learned on Lightroom. Actually, I learned on GIMP, which is like a free version. You know, when you first start out, you have like no money for anything. And my darling husband downloaded GIMP, and that's kind of how I taught myself how to process images. But I really, once I got a little bit of money, realized I needed Lightroom and Photoshop. So I taught myself Lightroom Classic. And then when CC came out, I was like, oh, let me jump on this. And I taught myself CC. So you're going to see me kind of move very comfortably throughout this video, showing you all the different tools. That's just because I've been editing in Lightroom for about 8 years now. So things are very second nature to me. Okay. So I am going to jump in right here, and we are going to try our best to make this yellow image perfection. Okay. So those of you that are wondering, I will flash my settings up here on the screen. I was using my 24mm. I was standing on a very short step stool above the mama. I love doing this bird's eye angle because this is what moms see for the most year of their baby's life, right? Their first year. They see a top-down view of their baby. And I love capturing this because a lot of times the mamas are like, oh my gosh, I remember that little profile, or I remember seeing that view. And it's really nostalgic for the mamas. So I try to do this in every one of my newborn sessions. So this is shot natural light in the nursery, and you can look, if you look way up here, I'll make my mouse nice and big. You can see that they had a window with natural light bleeding through here. Okay. We are going to kind of go through, and we're going to do this without a preset. So I want you to really get to know your tools. That is one of the things I'm going to encourage you as a beginner. Know what all of these things do. I know they're intimidating. I understand that it can be scary, but we are going to work through them, and I'm going to explain what they are. This may be a long video, so make sure that you have some water, some coffee, something to drink, that you've used the bathroom, and that you're ready to edit. So when you first open your Lightroom, it's probably going to look like this. Unless you have been playing in here for quite some time. All of your tools are going to be minimized. Super easy. You're not going to mess anything up. And if you do, you can always start, you can always X out of Lightroom and start over. Okay. So don't be afraid to press buttons. You're not going to mess up your photo unless you save it. Then you need to really make sure that you want to save it, right? So you can always go back in Lightroom when you're editing. All right, we are going to pop open all of these one by one so I can show you what they do. And I actually edit opposite most people. I start at my bottom and I make mass adjustments. Okay, now geometry is where you can mess with your actual structure of your image. If you feel like it's got a bit of distortion, or you feel like you need to change the offsets or the horizontals, you can go in here. So I'm just going to kind of explain what these do as we go. The distortion is what happens when you get a bird's eye lens. You can see that I can change distortion basically by dragging this slider. I can pull out the center, which is what a wide angle lens would do, or I can push it back, which is what a longer focal length would do for you. Okay, so that's where you can kind of fix some of those things. Sometimes if I'm getting really artsy and it's like a newborn portrait, I love to really mess with the distortion and put the focus on that sweet baby's face. But I don't want to do that for this one. So anytime that you do something with your sliders and you want to go back to normal quickly, if you just double click right on the dot, it brings it right back to 0. It'll reset. Okay, so keep that in mind. That's a little trick. Now you'll see each of these you can tilt. That's very helpful if you're doing buildings or like the beach or something like that. You can also go left to right in here. That's really fun too. You can rotate, slight rotations if you need to. So you can kind of mess with that. I don't often go into my geometry. Okay, so I usually keep that down. Our next window is the optics. Now I start every single image here. Okay, oh, whoops, I just realized. So you see this white up here. Something did not reset. Here it is, horizontal and vertical. Okay. This optics, this is something I use all the time. Chromatic aberration is, there's color bleed basically between the images, and it can lead to a little bit softer images. I always say remove that chromatic aberration no matter what image I'm editing. That is my first step on every image. Now, here's where you get to start making your decision as a creator, okay? There is a way to enable your lens corrections. This is my lens, completely natural. If you notice the difference, I'll toggle it back on and off. Look at the sides here. You'll notice a slight vignetting. You'll also notice that when I don't have it on, the middle part of my image is pulled out ever so slightly. Watch again. Okay, that's dealing with that distortion. I often do not enable this unless I am shooting a bright and airy image in which I don't want any sort of shadowing or vignetting that my lens naturally does. Okay, so that's your choice. If you like that flat look and you want that light and airy thing, you can mess with this as much as you need to. And you can add vignetting, your lens vignetting back in if you want to. Totally your decision. And I want to encourage you to play with those sliders anytime you get stuck, okay? So that's my first edit. I go to optics, and I will leave that out. Then I go into details, and this is where I do a lot of my work. If I'm applying a preset, I will do that first, but for the most part, if I'm editing straight from RAW, I come down here. I love to add in a lot of sharpening, a small amount of noise reduction, and I like to keep my noise reduction, color noise reduction between 10, maybe up to 40. It just depends, okay? I'm already going to show you the difference just in that sharpening so that you can see. Very small, but look at the buttons on the baby's onesie, okay? You notice they come much more into view, and now instead of just seeing a black line, you can see 2 black dots. That's what sharpening does. It takes what you shot and it adds a finer line to it. Now, please be warned, my friends, a lot of beginners make this mistake. They push sharpening way up to 100. Okay, now on this image, it doesn't matter quite so much. But you will notice in some of them, it really does. They push their sharpness up because they think, oh, sharpness, that's what I want, right? I want more sharpness, more sharpness. Well, what happens is you end up getting a lot of grain, and you end up getting a lot of very harsh lines in your images. And people can tell, even if they aren't able to explain what you did, people can tell that you messed with your image and it didn't come out of your camera looking like that. So be really careful when you're messing with that sharpening. You want to keep everything natural, okay? All right, so that's detail. I am going to now start working on the effects. Every single photographer has a different way of doing things, okay? A lot of them will really increase that clarity if they like that kind of super look. They decrease clarity if they want it very dreamy. I actually have a recipe, and I don't vary much from that, and it's kind of tried and true. It depends on the image, but I like to put a bit of texture, and I like to actually decrease my clarity the tiniest bit. And I also dehaze to bring a little bit more depth and dimension into my image. And I will add a little bit of grain as well, usually for in-home. If I'm outside, I don't like to add grain, but if I'm in-home, I love that feeling. It kind of is like homespun and organic feeling. All right, so I'm going to toggle off and on, and that's a way that you can see now. It doesn't look like we've made many adjustments to this yet. Don't worry, we're getting to those big ones. But you can see down here, this little box, it's going to be different for you if you have Lightroom Classic. It's going to show it at the bottom of your editing right here. You can see you can toggle beginning or before and after very easily here, okay? That's what we started with, and that's what we've got already. All right, we're going to continue this train. Take a big breath. Here we go. This is where it gets a little crazy, and I'm going to jump out of order to show you some of the tools. We're going to start up here with light. Light is where you do a lot of your light adjustments. You can add in things, take away things, soften things, sharpen things, all of that just by using this panel and the tone curve. All right, so you know exposure. Exposure is how much light is in the image versus how dark the image is. You are shooting in your camera, hopefully, to get your exposure very close to perfect. All right, I want you to work on that, okay? But if you don't, you can always come in here and change it to fit what you would like to do. Now, I'm going to add a tiny bit of exposure just to make things a little easier. I love to add in a bit of contrast also. Now, you're noticing this looks terrible. We have not done any of the white balance adjusting yet, but I'm looking at the details of my image, okay? I like to pull out my highlights. I find that it gives me a softer newborn image, and I like to pull down my shadows quite a bit, push up my whites, and pull down my blacks. Now this is going to help me define like the grain in the grain in the wood, the detail in the ottoman, the detail in her bonnet. Okay. All right. So like again, I said, anytime you don't know what something does, pull it all the way down, push it all the way up to see the change. Okay. So I'm going to pull down my blacks. All right, now we're going to get to the point curve. It's called a tone curve. A lot of people, well, you'll hear them say an S curve, and there are a million things we can do in here. A million. You can change so many parts of your image. But basically, you see the histogram here. What this does is it adjusts the structure of your image to get different tone curves. Down here, you'll notice is our shadows. And if I pull this up, I get that really pretty matte effect that a lot of popular photographers like to use. Over here is our highlights, and if I pull that down, all my highlights go away. It's not the same as exposure though, okay? What a lot of people like to do is they like to create an S curve. What they do is they put a dot here and a dot here, and they will adjust their image to get this beautiful S. Now, it looks terrible on my image, but that is called an S curve. And that is what a lot of photographers will do that, or they'll do the inverse on their images. Now, I'm doing mass adjustments, obviously, so you can see what it does. But a lot of them will do a little S curve in their images. You can change a lot of things here just by fine-tuning, and a lot of custom editors will do just that. I don't use my tone curve a ton unless I have to fix something, okay? Same thing again, you can get rid of those points just by double clicking on them. All right, now we are going to get into the fun stuff. We are going to get into color. I know this looks so overwhelming. I'm gonna explain it and kind of demystify it for you, okay? So, color. Right now you see white balance and it says as shot. I shot this in Kelvin. I shoot all my images in Kelvin. We can go over that later maybe, but you have an option to do auto. You can switch to daylight. You can change to cloudy, and I'm going to go through those so you can see the difference. Okay, so daylight adds a little bit more green in. Cloudy will overcompensate and make your images warm, because if you're shooting on a cloudy day, they're automatically more blue. All right, shade, same thing. They will add a little bit of pop and it will make it very warm. Tungsten is what you want to do if you are shooting in a tungsten lit space, like a hospital or something like that. It's going to make it very blue to compensate for the very warm lights. Fluorescent does the same thing. It pulls down the blues and pushes up the purples to give you a greater control over your lighting. Fluorescent lighting is disgusting and everyone hates it. If you're using a flash, it also will overcompensate for you. And you can even set it to custom, okay? So we are going to keep it on as shot. And I'm going to show you 2 tricks to master your white balance. If you look over here, there is an eyedropper. Now, I will tell you right now, this does not work all the time, okay? You're still going to have to mess with your balance to get it right to your eyes. But here's the first trick. If you hit this eyedropper and you come on now, work with me. Oh my goodness. Why is it not coming with us? All right, there we go. Sometimes you just have to click things a few times. I'm going to go over a space, and do you see the pixelations in my space? This is the selector tool, and it is searching for, as I'm moving my mouse, it's searching for something that is neutral. You can click on a white, you can click on a gray, anything that the camera can determine as neutral. Okay, so I am going to hover over here. Now, I don't want to click on this really pretty earthy color because that's not a neutral tone. I know that this dresser was supposed to be white. I know that mom's dress is cream, and I know that baby's romper was supposed to be white. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to click, and look at what that did. It took out all the yellow, but it made my image look very blue. So it can fix problems if you really mess things up, or it can make them much worse. I don't love this all the time. So I am going to actually come in and I'm going to fix it and do my own. Now I know that the baby skin was not anywhere near that purple. So I'm going to start all the way up here. I'm going to pull my temperature until I get that really beautiful creamy color. And I am actually going to pull this down, 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 until I see the baby's skin tone. Now, I love to mess with my vibrance and really push it up, okay? I'm still going to come down here. There we go. All right, now you can see the difference that made, okay? Here's what my camera, or my SOOC, which is straight out of camera. Here's what that looked like, and here's where we are now. You notice the baby skin tone is still super blue. These tones are not anywhere near what I want it to be. That happens a lot, and most people are terrified to come into this color mixer, also known as your HSL sliders, okay? That's where all the magic happens, friends. That's where a lot of your presets are going to be applied in there, all right? That's why your work does not look like the professionals that you see. Now, saturation is how much of your color is in an image. Most people will never go to the plus side of their saturation because you see it starts to make it look very ridiculous. I actually pull saturation out quite a bit. Now, this image is not anywhere near where I want it to be. And the way that we're going to get there, look, this is my final image, okay? The way that we're going to get there is by going in and adjusting each color separately, all right? So we are going to come down here to our color mixer. I am going to make sure that I have color selected, not hue or saturation or luminance, because I'm going to mess with that down here. And I like to, what I just call chase the rainbow. I like to start with the reds. Anytime you want to see what is red in your image, what that red hue is happening, is come in here and pull out your saturation and push up your saturation, and you can see. If it's very obvious, you'll get to see it right away. If it's not obvious, you will see it a little bit, okay? You can also do the same for hue. Look for what's changing in my images. I don't have a ton of red, but if you look here in the baby's hand, and if you look in the ottoman, you can see as I change it from purple to yellow or to orangish, you can see what's changing. Okay, so I'm going to actually make mine slightly more orangey, and I'm going to actually increase the reds a little bit. I'm going to go and do the same thing for my orange now. If you're unsure of what is orange in your image, you can play with your saturation, and you can see my orange is affecting so much of this image. Okay, I don't want to saturate it yet. I want to get the right balance. I like to edit my images slightly more magenta in color. Now, don't worry about the baby's skin. We will fix that in just a second, okay? And that looks really good to me because I want to balance it now with my yellows. My yellows, I'm going to come and make much more orangey. Okay? And you're just basically going to mess with those sliders. Now, here is a trick. This skin tone does not look right to me at all. I'm going to come up and actually increase the saturation a little, or the exposure a little bit. Okay. This does not look right to me at all. So I want to come down here and I'm going to make my fine adjustments. Now, a lot of professional photographers don't even know this. Okay. You're going to click this little target and you're going to drag over here and you're going to click on an area you want to edit. Let's start with the hat, okay? I'm going to click on that hat, and you see if you hold down your left button, mouse button, you can see that you are getting a slider here. I can increase saturation in only that color. I can decrease saturation in only that color. See that? So I'm going to increase my saturation, and I'm going to come down here and change the hue now. By pulling back on my mouse, it makes it more purple. Pushing up on my mouse, it makes it more green. Okay, so I'm going to come until I get the right tone of that bonnet. And I love that color right there. All right, so we are going to leave that there. I'm going to do the same trick now for the baby's skin. Okay, I don't want it to be quite so purple. So I'm going to come up here and I am going to adjust it to more yellow. I also would like it to be slightly more saturated. So I'm going to push up my mouse to get that baby's skin much more saturated. And I'm going to click luminance to make it slightly darker, okay? By pushing up, I'm going to make it brighter. By pulling down, I'm going to make it darker. And I'm going to toggle off and on so you can see what a difference that makes. Okay. All right. Now, that is a little trick for getting your skin tones pretty close to right. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to come in here and mess with our color grading. If you have done any film, you know that this is what they, the wheels is what they use to manipulate their film. So we're going to do the same thing here. Okay. We are going to come and we are going to mess with the midtones, the shadows, and the highlights in our image. By grabbing this circle and moving it around, you can see the difference it makes in just the midtones of my image. I can make it more yellow. I can make it slightly more purple and better the further I move out. So I actually want to put some orange in there. I can make my shadows very blue. I can make my shadows very green. I can make my shadows very purple for a very vintagey feel. Okay. As with all things in your editing, you want to make sure that your touches are very small. Okay. Now I'm going to come in here with my highlights, and I want my highlights to be warm. So I'm going to push up into the oranges for my highlights. Whoops, not purple. Okay. I'm going to toggle before and after so you can see the difference there. Okay. All right. Now we're looking pretty good. I still have some. This is where the magic happens now. And once I've got my white balance exactly right, I'm going to come up and I'm going to mess again with all of my details. Okay. So this is in our main panel. You can see right here, this is where all of your editing will happen. This is if you want to crop or constrain or move your images. Okay. Whoops. This is if there's something in here you want to heal. Now, I will tell you, it's a lot easier to heal things in Photoshop than it is in Lightroom. Sometimes it'll work for small things. Sometimes it massively messes it up. Okay. Here is a brush if you want to add a specific selected thing to any area, which we're going to use that, but we're going to actually come down here to this circle. This is called your radial gradient. You use this, you see this little arrow or this little cross, you drag or click on a spot in your image and you pull it open to make it larger. You push smaller, larger. You can make it an oval. You can make it perfectly round, all by holding your mouse. Okay. Now, when you let go of your mouse, you're going to get what I call the radial target. Whatever is red is what will be affected by your adjustment. Whatever is not red is what's not going to be affected. So I drag that to the center of my image. I make it large by pulling on these dots. I want it to affect the middle of my image. Okay, so I'm going to make that nice and large, and I'm going to drag it right down over the focal point of my image. I want to warm this baby up quite a bit. I want to push down the exposure a little bit, pull up the contrast, pull down the highlights and the shadows, pull down the blacks, maybe increase the exposure a little bit. Okay. I want that baby to be the most beautiful focal point of my image. And I'm going to actually even take out a little bit of that purple. Here we go. Okay. Do you see how I did that? And if I like how it's looking, I can do that right there and make it affect the whole image. Okay. So off. On, we are getting so much closer. Now you notice I have a little bit too much orange in there, right? So I'm going to come down and I'm actually going to pull down the saturation. Most of your editing is just messing with stuff. Yes, I like that. No, I don't like that. So don't be afraid to play. Okay. Do not be afraid to play. All right. Now, same thing for this gray box. This is a linear gradient. If you wanted to add more light into your image, you would just do the same thing you did for your radial. You drag and pull down. You can add exposure only in that one area, or you can make it darker. I use this quite often when I'm on the beach to mess with my skies and my oceans. Okay. So we're going to add a little bit more light in there. Again, before, after. And we are getting very, very close. I still want to mess with Mom's sweater because I feel like it's a little bit too purple. So if I'm going to look at this, I'm going to come in, I'm going to use that target once again. Remember, it was in the color mixer. I'm going to use that target once again, and I'm going to come in here and click on Mom's Sweater, and I'm going to make it more green. Whoops, we're on luminance. I don't want luminance. There we go. That's better. Much better. Okay, now I'm going to mess with baby's skin. I want to make it slightly yellower, but I really want to pull that saturation out. Keep going till it looks real. We don't want to go too far. Okay. All right, everybody. What are we thinking? It's looking good, right? Pretty good so far. That is how you do that, my friends. I am going to add a little bit more magenta into this. There we go. And I am going to mess with this bonnet one more time because I want it more purple and not so green. Okay, so I'm going to get my target. I'm going to come in here. I'm going to increase the saturation. I'm going to make it more purple. There we go. That is much better. Okay. Now, you could pull it into Photoshop and make a ton of different changes if you want to, but we're going to leave it here for now because I don't want to give you too much confusion. And I am going to show you the before and the after. Before, after. All right, so let's say I wanted to export that. I'm going to come up here to this little share button, click that, and I have a lot of choices here. I have custom settings, small, large, original. I want to export this to fit with whatever I'm going to use it for. If I'm publishing it to social media, I'm going to choose small, which is already set for 2048 pixels and 90% quality. If I'm going to deliver it to my client, I'm going to choose JPEG large. If I'm going to send it to an editor, I'm going to click original plus settings so they can see the straight out of camera, but they can also see my edits. Or you can come up here and do custom. Okay, so I would just click export small. I would select my folder wherever I want to save it. Like, let's say, for example, we want to save this to edit with me. Select folder, and it will export for me, and I'll be able to find it there. All right, everybody. I want you to take a big breath. I know this isn't chatty like my normal thing. This is a lot more instructional. But I want you to take a big breath and tell yourself these things. I can do this. I am good at this. I am going to show the world my lens. No one's going to stand in my way. And if I have questions, I'm going to ask those questions every single time. Okay. I hope you enjoyed spending time with me today. I sure did with you. And I'm going to sign off. As always, darling friend, never forget that you are loved, you are worthy, you are so valuable, and the world needs your lens. Bye for now. See you next video.